Evan Keller, he rested his head on the back of his airplane seat and closed his eyes. The pre-dawn light was glimmering through the window. He was returning home a day earlier than planned, exhausted from a 2-week assignment in Texas. Wildfires were raging down south, and as a fire captain, he had been assigned to lead a group of volunteers sent to help the local crews. It had been a long flight with tiring layovers. Evan was physically tired, but most of all, he was homesick. He was a man of few words, reserved the way his service and years in the fiery element had brought him up. He had a decade of work under his belt in a variety of conditions, from city high-rise buildings to mountain ranges, where access to a fire was only possible by air. A strong jaw, slightly grayed temples, and an eternal wrinkle between his eyebrows, all this spoke not so much of his age as of the severity of the decisions he had to make. But behind the external severity, there was a man with a subtle sense of justice and pain for every failure. He didn't like to talk about himself. Even his colleagues knew about his family only from fragmentary phrases, and at home his wife and 9-year-old daughter were waiting for him, two quiet shores between which he tried to maintain balance, returning from each new hell. During the 2 weeks of separation, he realized how much he missed the voices and laughter of his loved ones. Especially in the evenings, when after grueling shifts he missed the familiar comfort, quiet conversations with his wife in the kitchen with her tired but warm eyes, thin fingers hugging a mug, and a stray strand of light brown hair that she always tucked behind her ear when she was listening intently, and the way his stepdaughter Claire would run out to greet him as soon as he crossed the threshold, with her tousled dark curls, in her owl pajamas and her invariable multicolored socks. Her eyes, bright green and sparkling, always shone with genuine joy, as if it was his return that she had been waiting for all day. He ran his hand over his face, trying to shake off the tension of the last few days. At 41, Evan felt the weight of responsibility for his home and loved ones more acutely than ever. Perhaps it was his years of service. He had seen too many other people's tragedies and fires. In his mind's eye, the recent scene in Texas appeared again. The charred ruins of a house where a fire had claimed the lives of a mother and child, while the father sobbed, kneeling by the ashes. Such images remain forever with those who saw them. It was then, hugging a man lost in grief, that Evan thought of his loved ones again. He vowed that he would do everything to protect his family from any harm. This experience made him even more appreciative of his own quiet world, his home, his quiet everyday life. The plane's landing gear touched the runway gently. Evan shuddered and finally woke up from his slumber. He gathered his things and stepped out onto the cool morning platform. The airport was barely waking up. Here and there, rare passengers yawned. Evan caught a taxi and leaned back in his seat. His heart began to beat faster at the thought that in just half an hour he would see familiar faces. The city was just waking up. The streets were almost empty. When the taxi pulled up to a neat one-story house on a quiet street on the outskirts, the sky in the east was just beginning to turn pink. The soft dawn enveloped the houses in a pale golden light, lulling the already sleepy suburb. Evan paid, shouldered his duffel bag, and headed to the porch. Strangely, there was no light in the windows. He had warned his wife, Jenny, that he would be back only the following evening, but he had managed to get free earlier and decided to make a surprise visit, and he himself could not wait to be home a day earlier to smell the warm smell of coffee, to hear the creak of the floorboards in the hallway, to hug his loved ones. He tried not to make any noise as he opened the front door with his key. Inside the house, darkness and silence reigned. Usually at this hour, Jenny would already be up and putting coffee on the stove, turning on the radio in the kitchen, rustling around in the closet, choosing clothes for the day. But now the house seemed deserted. The silence was not just morning silence, it seemed unnatural. Evan quietly set his bag down by the coat rack. His nostrils caught the faintest hint of a foreign scent, a subtle scent of men's cologne that wasn't his own. He frowned. The living room smelled of fresh perfume, not harsh but expensive, with woody, spicy notes. He definitely didn't wear this. Maybe one of his neighbors or colleagues had stopped by. He tried to reassure himself, but an uneasy chill had already begun to rise from his stomach to his throat. Everything inside him tensed, as if before an unexpected explosion. He walked deeper into the house and looked into the kitchen. There was a cup on the table, half full of cold coffee. A spoon lay abandoned nearby. Usually Jenny never left dirty dishes. She washed them right away. Weird, Evan thought. Maybe she drank coffee and suddenly rushed off somewhere without cleaning up. A slight tremor stirred inside him. Evan moved toward the bedroom. The door was closed, and he pushed it carefully. In the faint morning light that filtered through the curtains, he made out a silhouette on the bed. Jenny was asleep, the blanket pulled up to her chin. Her dark hair was spread out on the pillow. Evan quietly came up and sat on the edge of the bed. His heart was filled with joy. Here it was, the long-awaited moment of return. He touched his wife's shoulder and called softly, "Jen, honey, I'm home." Jenny stirred and opened her eyes. She looked at him for a few seconds, as if she couldn't believe that this wasn't a dream, then sat up abruptly. "Evan," she whispered, frantically pulling the blanket to her chest. "Are you back already?" A day earlier, he explained with a smile, leaning closer. "I wanted to make it a surprise." But Jenny didn't smile back. Confusion and fear flashed in her eyes. Evan felt a pang of anxiety. Had something happened? Before he could ask, Jenny suddenly wrapped her arms around his neck and pressed her whole body against him. "Oh God, you're back," she breathed out, her voice trembling. Evan hugged his wife tightly, feeling her tremble slightly. Nervous about my sudden appearance, he thought, guiltily stroking her back. It's his own fault he didn't warn her. He wanted to make it a surprise. "It's okay, I'm home," he whispered soothingly. Gradually, Jenny stopped shaking in his arms. She pulled back and looked at him more thoughtfully, a tense smile playing on her lips. "You're probably hungry? I'll cook something now," she muttered hastily. Jenny crawled out from under the blanket, holding the fabric to her chest, and quickly pulled on the robe hanging on the chair. Evan noted her stiffness. Usually she rushed to kiss him without even thinking about decency like a robe. Putting it down to the unexpectedness of her arrival, he smiled. "Don't bother. I'm fine. Better tell me, how are you here without me?" He stood up after her, trying to make out his wife's face in the semi-darkness. But Jenny had turned away, hiding her hair under the hood of her robe. "Everything is as usual," she answered and walked past the door. "Claire is fine. School, friends. I worked, took care of the house. We missed you." The last words sounded sincere, but even caught a note of nerve. He followed his wife into the kitchen. Jenny flicked the switch. The harsh light blinded him for a second. His wife fussed about the kettle. Evan sat down at the table. The same half-drunk cup of coffee was still in front of him. Apparently, she drank it during the night and did not put it away right away. Jenny rushed to the table and discreetly put the cup in the sink, quickly rinsing it. "Sit down, I'll make some fresh tea now," she chattered. "How was your flight?" "Fine," Evan watched curiously as she tried not to meet his gaze. "A little tired." He reached across the table and covered her hand with his. Jenny flinched. "Are you sure everything is okay?" he asked softly. "You seem a bit tense." "I just wasn't expecting you last night," she answered quickly, forcing a smile. "I was worried while you were out in the wilderness without contact." Evan nodded guiltily. "Yes, sorry, there was almost no reception there. But now I'm home." He took a sip of the tea she placed in front of him and watched his wife in silence. The drink was a little stronger than usual. Jenny always knew how he liked it, without sugar, with a drop of lemon. It seemed like everything was as usual, but the excitement did not go away. On the contrary, it gained weight, settling heavily in his chest. Jenny was nervously stroking the tabletop, her fingers barely touching the lacquered surface, as if smoothing something invisible. Every now and then she would glance at him briefly, not exactly guilty, but as if wary. Evan would catch her glance, but she would immediately lower her eyes, as if avoiding direct contact. He mentally pulled himself up. Stop suspecting without reason. Don't turn fatigue into paranoia. After all, she had been faithful to him for the 7 years of their marriage, ever since they got married. Jenny had always been there. during the long night shifts when he returned in the early mornings smelling of smoke and sweat, in the moments when he doubted himself, when work ate up almost all his free time. She didn't complain, didn't reproach. She just was, like a quiet anchor, keeping him grounded in reality. They had been through a lot. Raising Claire, the girl, was only 5 when he entered their lives, and at first she avoided him, watching him warily from behind her mother's back. But over time, a real bond grew between them, strong, as if they were family. He knew how important it was to win her trust, not obsessively, not by force, but with love, patience, everyday little things. Now she called him Daddy easily, without hesitation. They had also endured the hardships of his first years as captain, the unstable schedule, the dangerous calls, when every day could be his last. Jenny had always been a loving, gentle wife, his quiet support, and the home he came back to. Could one long business trip of his really ruin everything? Evan swallowed, looking down into his cup. The liquid inside trembled, as if reflecting his own state. He felt an invisible crack creep into the familiar, the safe, barely noticeable, but frightening. He didn't want to ask questions, but the silence between them was becoming too loud. The thought hurt, a dull, tugging pain that couldn't be put into words. Evan walked around the table and wrapped his arms around his wife from behind, holding her close. He felt her body shudder slightly in surprise, but he ignored it. He inhaled the familiar scent of her perfume light, with notes of jasmine and vanilla. So beloved, so familiar, so highs. "How I missed you," he whispered, kissing her dark curls, touching his lips to the top of her head, where soft, fluffy curls always gathered. Jenny exhaled tensely, as if she had only just now allowed herself to breathe. Then she covered his hands with her trembling palm, thin, cool, almost elusive. He felt an invisible wall rise between them again, not aggressive, not sharp, but tangible, like glass. A transparent barrier behind which she was no longer quite with him. Perhaps, after a long separation, they need to get used to each other again. He repeated this thought like a mantra. Otherwise, what? "I missed you too," she whispered. Her voice was dull, as if smeared. "Let's talk about everything in the morning, okay? You're tired from the road." There was a pleading note in her voice. Not aggression, not irritation, but rather a desire to delay, as if the conversation itself was dangerous. Evan reluctantly let her go. "You're probably right. A shower and a couple of hours of sleep wouldn't hurt me. Is there water in the boiler?" "Yes, everything is fine," Jenny answered quickly and immediately began to clean the already clean kitchen table. She wiped the crumb-free surface with a rag, as if trying to keep her hands busy so as not to turn to him. "Go and rest. I'll finish here for now." He nodded, shrugged less out of indifference than out of an attempt to ignore it, and headed for the bathroom. The walk down the hallway, usually warm and homely, now seemed unusually empty. The walls seemed to absorb the sound of his footsteps. In the bathroom, Evan stripped off his clothes, threw them in the hamper, and turned on the shower. The warm streams washed away the dust of the road, the sweat, the tension. He closed his eyes, letting the water run down his face, and tried not to think. Just being here, at home. A few minutes later, he was already falling into bed clean, neatly made. The sheets smelled of fresh linen and something of hers familiar, but a little. Different? He couldn't figure out exactly what had alerted him. Perhaps it was fatigue. Jenny didn't return to the bedroom. She seemed to have decided not to disturb his sleep and lay down on the sofa. Strange. Usually after separation, she wanted to be closer, to bury her nose in his shoulder, to exchange words until they fell asleep. But now nothing. Just cold, even silence. Evan caught her footsteps in the other room, soft and gliding. Then the click of a light switch, the soft creak of the sofa. He listened for a few more moments, but exhaustion took its toll. Only by closing his eyes did he fall into a deep, heavy sleep without dreams, but with a feeling of sediment in his chest. He woke up around noon from a timid knock on the bedroom door. Evan stretched, driving away the remnants of his dreams. "Come in," he called hoarsely. The door opened slightly, and Claire's thin figure appeared on the threshold. Seeing that her stepfather had woken up, the girl, already more like a teenager of 14, threw up her hands. "Dad, you're home." Evan's heart filled with warmth. He still couldn't get used to how grown-up Claire had become. It seemed like only a short time ago she had been a baby that he had carried on his shoulders, and now here stood a slender girl with clear gray eyes shining with joy. Evan sat up in bed and opened his arms. Claire rushed to him and hugged him tightly. "Daddy, how we missed you," she said, burying her face in his shoulder. Evan inhaled the light scent of her shampoo, heard her familiar voice, and only now fully realized how much he missed her. He hugged his daughter to himself. "I missed you too, sunshine." Claire pulled back and looked him up and down with a smile. "You're so bushy," she giggled, touching his stubble. "You're like a real Texas cowboy." Evan chuckled. "The hat is still missing. How are you here? Tell me." Claire settled down next to him on the edge of the bed, swinging her leg. "Everything is fine. School as usual. I just missed you a lot." Jenny appeared in the doorway, already dressed in jeans and a sweater. She leaned against the doorframe, watching them. There was a soft smile on her face, although it was a bit forced. "Well, here you are," she said quietly. "Sorry I didn't wake you up this morning. I'll let you sleep." Evan noticed her gaze linger on his embrace with Claire. A shadow flickered in his wife's gaze, sadness or guilt. He involuntarily released his daughter. Claire, too, immediately cringed, looking at her mother warily and coldly. The previous joy instantly disappeared somewhere. "I'll make you some breakfast. I mean lunch," Jenny said quickly, straightening up. "Claire, will you help?" "I've already eaten at Marta's," the girl muttered, standing up. "But if you need it, I can help." "No, you don't need to," Jenny immediately objected. "Mind your own business." Claire snorted and slipped out of the room past her mother without even looking at her. Jenny looked down and disappeared after her daughter. Evan sat there dumbfounded. What just happened? It was like a black cat had passed between mother and daughter. They were usually very close. Did they really quarrel over a trifle? Or an unpleasant thought crept into his mind. Perhaps Claire knew or guessed something about what was troubling Jenny. He washed up, changed into his clothes, and went down to the kitchen. A freshly cooked omelet with bacon was steaming on the table, bread was sliced, and there was orange juice. Jenny was busy at the stove, but when she heard him, she sat down opposite him, folding her hands in front of her. "Eat," she suggested quietly. Evan began to eat. Jenny sat opposite him, tense, as if she wanted to say something but couldn't bring herself to. Finally, she broke the silence. "You're probably surprised that I wasn't home last night," she began hesitantly. I can explain everything." Evan froze, fork in hand. His wife had clearly decided to return to the morning's question. He nodded slowly, silently inviting her to continue. Jenny looked away. "You see, a friend of mine invited me to spend the night yesterday. Laura. Do you remember Laura? We stayed up late, and I decided to stay at her place so as not to have to drive across town at night. I thought you would be gone until this evening." She spoke quickly, haltingly. Her eyes darted around. Evan stared at her face. He knew Laura, his wife's best friend, of course. She lived on the other side of town. At first glance, the story sounded plausible. But why was Jenny so scared when she saw him at night? And where did men's cologne come from in the house? However, he had no direct evidence, and he forced himself to remove the suspicion from his voice. "Well, I see. Did you have a hen party? I hope you had a good chat." Jenny visibly relaxed at the seemingly calm tone. She nodded. "Yes, we chatted. About everything." She tried to smile. Evan remained silent. He was not satisfied, but he did not want to argue without proof. Perhaps he really was winding himself up. His wife looked grateful that he accepted her explanation, but her tension did not completely subside. "Where did Claire spend the night?" he asked casually. "At Martha's," Jenny answered immediately, referring to her daughter's school friend. They were working on a joint project, and Martina's parents invited her to join them. Evan nodded. That explained why Claire hadn't been home last night, and it made perfect sense. He finished the omelet, complimented Jenny on her cooking and taste. Though he barely felt anything, he was too busy with his own thoughts. The tension seemed to dissipate little by little. His wife even tried to chat about trivialities, and he supported her. At that moment, the sound of a gate opening came from the yard. The front door slammed, and soon Claire's voice called out, "Mom, it's me. Marta gave me my phone charger." The daughter walked into the kitchen and stopped short when she saw her parents. Evan smiled. "Hi, sunshine. How was your day?" "Fine," she muttered as she stepped through the door. Her mother looked at her questioningly. Claire handed Jenny a small charger box. "Thanks, Mom." "Please, dear," Jenny responded. Evan could almost feel the tension between them. He cleared his throat and stood up. "Well, girls, I think I'll go for a walk to the unit. I need to check that I'm back, and at the same time take a walk after the road." He himself needed to be alone and think it all over. Jenny frowned. "Does it have to be today? You're on vacation after a business trip." "5 minutes," he waved it off, "and I need to stretch my legs." He kissed his wife on the cheek, patted Claire on the shoulder, and left. It was a quiet autumn day outside. Golden leaves rustled underfoot. Evan walked down the familiar street, his hands in his pockets, trying to sort out the whirlwind of thoughts. On the one hand, he scolded himself for his bad suspicions. What could have happened in 2 weeks? Jenny had given a plausible explanation for her absence last night. On the other hand, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The daughter was cold to her mother, he could see that. Claire and Jenny had always been very close. What could have distanced the girls so much? A frightening guess crept into his head again. What if Claire knew something or saw something, and now she was angry with her mother? Evan sighed heavily. He needed to find out, but carefully. Perhaps he could talk to his stepdaughter confidentially, hint that he could tell him everything. Claire had always been open with him. Without noticing it, he reached the fire station, located a few blocks away. The red and white depot, the garages with cars, everything was familiar. The guys were happy with the captain's sudden appearance. They patted him on the shoulder and joked about Texas cowboys. Evan reported to the authorities that he had returned, filled out the paperwork. About 40 minutes later, he went outside again. His head had cleared a little from the friendly conversation. His favorite work always distracted him from worries. "Maybe I really am winding myself up for nothing," he thought. "Everything will work out." As Evan approached his house, he noticed through the hedge a strange dark blue car at the curb. A stranger was standing at the gate, apparently closing the gate guest. Evan tensed up and quickened his pace. When he entered the yard, the unfamiliar car was no longer visible, only the noise of the engine in the distance. The door of the house was unlocked. In the hallway, he ran into Claire. "Who came?" Evan asked immediately. Claire frowned. "This, Mom's consultant," she emphasized the word with emphasis. Jenny looked out of the living room. "Oh, you're back?" Her cheeks were flushed, there was sweat on her forehead, as if she had just been nervous or running. Evan glanced at the open door. "Did we have guests?" "Yes. A financial consultant came," Jenny squeezed out after a short pause. "Remember, I said I wanted to invest some money. Well, he came, told me the options." She spoke quickly, clearly trying to be casual. But Evan could see that she was still nervous. He was about to ask another question when Claire suddenly said loudly, looking angrily at her mother, "It was Adam, Dad, that very one man." Jenny gave her daughter a lightning-quick glance. "Claire, don't make up nonsense. Mr. Hayward really does advise me on finances." But the name was already echoing in Evan's ears. Adam. That same Adam. His suspicions flared up with renewed vigor. The morning scent of cologne. The strange behavior of his wife. And here he is, a certain Adam, a consultant who came in the absence of her husband. Evan put on a deliberately calm look, although inside everything was turning cold. "A consultant, you say? Excellent. I don't mind if it helps." He glanced at his stepdaughter, making it clear, "Not now." Claire pressed her lips together and, turning, ran headlong upstairs to her room, stomping loudly on the stairs. There was silence. Jenny shifted from one foot to the other and fiddled with the belt of her robe. Evan clenched his jaw and said quietly, "Well, a consultant is a consultant. Then you'll tell me too, okay?" "Okay," she breathed a sigh of relief. Evan nodded, no longer looking at his wife, and headed up to Claire. The most important thing now was to calm the girl down and find out what she knew. And the conversation with Jenny was still ahead. "Evan," his wife called quietly from below, "please don't think anything bad." He froze for a second on the stairs with his back to her. He really wanted to turn around and ask her directly, but he held back. "We'll talk later," he simply threw over his shoulder and went upstairs. Evan knocked on Claire's room door. "Can I come in?" It was quiet behind the door. He carefully opened it. The girl was sitting on the bed, her face buried in the pillow. Her shoulders were shaking, either from sobbing or from rage. "Claire," he began softly, closing the door behind him. She raised her head. Her eyes were red, her cheeks were wet with tears. At the sight of her stepfather, Claire rushed to meet him and hugged him tightly. "I knew it would happen," she said through tears. "I knew it would all come out. I'm sorry, Dad." Evan patted her head, amazed by her words. So she knew. My heart ached. The poor child had been carrying such a burden inside him all this time. "Hush, darling," he whispered, sitting her down next to him and putting his arm around her shoulders. "Tell me everything, please." Claire sobbed, wiping her eyes with her palm. She was silent for a moment, only her lips trembling as if she were gathering courage to speak the terrible truth. "I saw them," she finally whispered. "Who?" he asked softly, although he already understood. "Mom and that, Adam," the girl breathed out with hatred. 3 days ago, at night." Evan closed his eyes. 3 days ago. His departure, Claire with her friend. Now it all fits together. "I woke up by accident and went down to get a drink of water," Claire said quietly, barely holding back her tears. "The light was on in the living room. I thought my mother was sick or a thief had broken in. I came up quietly and looked in." She swallowed hard and Evan hugged her tighter, feeling her tremble. "And there was Mom and some man," she continued in a whisper. "On the couch. They were kissing. Mom's blouse was unbuttoned." She couldn't speak any more. She started crying again. Evan clenched his teeth to keep from groaning at the sight. He stroked her back, letting her cry, and at the same time feeling how everything inside him was breaking off from the pain. Jenny exactly cheated on him, and Claire witnessed this betrayal. "I asked my mother in the morning who came," the girl said, having calmed down a little. "She lied, that it was no one, that it seemed to me. She forbade me to talk about it." Bitterness and resentment were evident in every word. Evan understood her. His mother had betrayed not only him, but also her daughter, all their family trust. "Why didn't you tell me anything, kitten?" he asked quietly. Claire rubbed her forehead against his shoulder. "I didn't want to hurt you, and I didn't know how. I hoped she would come to her senses herself." Evan closed his eyes, trying to control his anger and shock. His daughter, small and fragile, had taken on such a knife to protect him. He almost burst into tears, but pulled himself together. "Thank you for telling me. You did the right thing. I'm so sorry you had to go through that." Claire raised her head. "Are you going to leave us now?" she asked fearfully. "Please don't leave me, Daddy." Evan barely held back the tears that were rolling down his face. He shook his head and, looking her straight in the eyes, said firmly, "I will never leave you. No matter what happens between adults, you are my daughter, and I will always be there. I promise." Claire nodded, wiping away the tears that were streaming down her face. She hugged him back, trusting his promise. "I was so scared," she whispered. "You left so angry yesterday." "I'm not angry at you," he sighed. "And I don't even know who I'm more angry at, my mother or this guy." Claire's face froze slightly with anger. "His name is Adam Hayward. He came a couple of times before like another mother's colleague. It seemed to be on business. At first, he was very polite, even tried to joke with me. "How grown up you are already," he said, and I felt disgusted. "Did he hit on you? Did he do anything inappropriate?" Evan asked, ready to explode. "No," the daughter shook her head. "But he looked at me strangely. I tried not to appear in his presence at all." Evan nodded and patted her on the back. "You did the right thing. Try to stay away from him now. And if he tries to contact you, tell me right away." "Of course, Dad," the girl answered seriously. He looked into her eyes. "You know that none of this is your fault, right? It was the adults who did this." "I know," Claire pressed her lips together, "but I still feel disgusted and offended." Evan hugged his daughter tightly again. "I'll fix everything, do you hear me? I don't know how yet, but I promise. I'll bring back my family and protect you." Claire pressed her cheek against his chest and whispered, "I believe you." A little while later, he laid his daughter down to rest and headed downstairs with determination. A hurricane of emotions raged in his chest. Now he knew the truth at least enough, and there was no point in hiding what he had learned. In the living room, Jenny sat on the sofa, her fingers clasped together and her eyes on the floor. She stood up abruptly when she heard her husband's footsteps. Her face was deathly pale. "Evan," she began, but stopped. He stopped a few steps away, barely keeping his composure. For a few seconds the room was silent, electric, as if before an explosion. "Claire told me everything," he said evenly, looking his wife straight in the eyes. Jenny gasped and clapped her hands to her mouth, her shoulders shaking. "I forgive you," she whispered, realizing that there was no point in denying it. Evan felt the anger and pain rush out, overwhelming him. He raised his voice, though he was holding back a scream. "How could you, Jenny? In our house, in front of a child." She rushed towards him, trying to take his hand. "It was a mistake, a terrible mistake." Evan pulled away, not letting her touch him. He noticed a reddish bruise on her wrist, as if a hand had squeezed her hard. He remembered Claire's words about the night visit and his wife's confession that morning. "I told him I didn't want this anymore." Had Adam really used force? A mistake? He asked bitterly. "Jenny, this is a betrayal, not a mistake. Claire cries for days. Do you understand?" "Claire." Jenny suddenly burst into tears. She saw, "God, what have I done?" "Exactly. What you did," Evan said clearly, and these calm words scared her more than the scream. "Tell me how it started and how long it lasted." Jenny, sobbing, spoke muffled through her palms. "We met at the gym. We corresponded. We met a few times. Everything started spinning. It lasted about a month. I lost my head, forgive me, but I woke up and realized that I only love you. That day when you came back, I wanted to end it all once and for all." "But Mr. Consultant was against it, right?" Evan said, nodding at her wrist. "He left this for you?" Jenny glanced at her hand and quickly hid it in her sleeve. "He got angry. He grabbed me." She sobbed. "He said he wouldn't give me up. I was scared." Evan closed his eyes, trying to control his rage. "It turns out that not only is he a lover, he's also an aggressive one. Do you know anything about him? Is he dangerous?" he asked harshly. Jenny wiped her wet face. I don't know. He said he used to live in another state. He had a wife, I think, but they got divorced." "Great," Evan ran his hand through his hair. "Well then, that's it." He straightened up and threw all emotion from his face except cold determination. "Right now my main task is to keep Claire safe. This man, Adam, must not come near her. Do you understand me?" Jenny nodded quickly. "Yes, sure. I'll get the police involved for that. Hopefully he'll back off. If not." Evan didn't finish, but his eyes flashed so hard that Jenny went cold. "I'll do whatever you say," she whispered submissively. "Evan, I know there's no forgiveness, but for God's sake, don't leave us." Evan looked at her long and hard. "I haven't decided anything yet. The most important thing now is our daughter. Take care of her while I'm gone." "Where are you?" she began, but he had already turned away and walked quickly out of the house. Jenny covered her face with her hands, watching him through her tears. She knew that there was a fire raging in her husband's soul, comparable only to the one he was putting out at work, and she was the culprit. Dusk found Evan behind the wheel of his car. After a difficult conversation with his wife, he couldn't sit still. He went for a drive around the city, trying to cool his head. Inside, everything was boiling with a mixture of anger and pain. The gray autumn sky hung over the streets. The first lights were lit in the windows. He didn't even notice how he found himself on the exit highway outside the city. There were few cars. Evan slowed down, immersed in heavy thoughts. What to do next? What to do? Suddenly, ahead, around the turn, there was a screech of brakes and a dull thud. Evan instantly tensed. As he rounded the corner, he saw an overturned SUV smoking by the side of the road. It looked like the car had skidded on the slippery road, knocking over a roadside pole and ending up on its side, almost upside down. Without a second thought, Evan slammed on the brakes, turned on the hazard lights, and jumped out of the car. As he ran, he grabbed a car fire extinguisher from the trunk. The hood of the overturned car began to smolder, greedy tongues of flame bursting out from underneath it. "Is anyone there?" Evan shouted, peering through the broken side window. There was a male driver inside, hanging unconscious from his seat belts. The smell of gasoline was overwhelming. The tank could explode at any second. Evan acted precisely as his many years of service experience had taught him. Having broken the remains of the side window, he squeezed inside the car. He shook out the airbags, got to the belt, and cut the strong fabric with a knife from the emergency kit. The man's body fell heavily down, or rather, hung upside down, because the car lay with its roof on the ground. Cursing carefully through his teeth, Evan grabbed the victim under the arms and pulled him out. It was hard at first. The man was large. His limp body was clinging to the steering wheel, but Evan put all his strength into it, and he managed to pull the victim out the window. Trying not to yank him too much, he pulled the man as far away from the car as he could, about 10 steps. He barely had time before there was a pop under the hood of the SUV, and the flames shot up. Evan laid the man down on the grass by the side of the road. He groaned alive. His head was cut, blood was pouring out of the wound, his leg was twisted at an unnatural angle, probably a fracture. "Hang in there, man," Evan muttered, grabbing his phone and dialing 911. He grabbed the fire extinguisher with his other hand and walked back to the car while the dispatcher was answering. Smoke and flames were already billowing out of the hood. Evan sprayed the fire extinguisher onto the area, trying to put out the flames. "The car is on fire after an accident. The driver is seriously injured," he briefly reported to the dispatcher, naming the highway and the approximate kilometer. "Send help." He began extinguishing the fire and providing assistance himself. "Understood, we're sending teams," the operator said crisply. Evan continued to calmly pour powder into the engine bay until the fire slowed down. The car was still emitting acrid smoke, but was no longer engulfed in flames. He returned to the victim. He opened his eyes and coughed. "Lie still," Evan patted him on the shoulder. "You were in an accident, but I got you out. The ambulance is on its way." "My leg." The man groaned, trying to turn his head towards the mangled car. "Don't move," Evan said sternly. "Your leg is broken. Just be patient for a little while." The man's breathing was rapid, a muffled groan of pain, but he nodded, letting him know he heard. Evan held his shoulder, trying to calm him down, and looked around. The sirens were getting closer. Another minute, a patrol car arrived at the scene of the accident, followed by an ambulance. Evan handed the victim over to the medics, briefly reporting the circumstances to the police officer. He was recognized. The fire captain's uniform was distinctive. "Well done, Captain Keller," the paramedic thanked him, hurrying to lift the wounded man onto a stretcher. "Without you, he might have burned." "I was there just in time," Evan waved his hand. "I was just doing my job." When the victim was taken away and the police thanked him and started processing the accident report, he returned to his car. His heart was still pounding from the adrenaline rush, and echoes of the recent fire were ringing in his ears. Saving someone else's life, Evan forgot about his own troubles for a moment. But as soon as the danger passed, the mental pain returned with renewed vigor. He couldn't help but think how easy it is to lose loved ones one accident, one fire, and how stupid it is to destroy a family with such betrayals. He sighed heavily as he leaned against the side of the truck. That's when he noticed his phone screen, several missed calls. It was Mark Raynaud, his detective friend. Evan immediately called Mark back. A plan was already forming in his head. He needed to gather all possible information about Adam and enlist the support of law enforcement if he was truly dangerous. Mark didn't answer right away. He was probably busy. Finally, his hoarse voice came over the speaker. "Hi, Keller. I called you already. I was starting to worry. Is everything okay?" "Yeah, sorry." Evan took a deep breath. "I got into an accident on the road. Had to rescue people. Everything is fine now." "Well, glad to hear it. It's been a while since we've heard from each other. How are you back from your firefighting adventures yet?" "Yeah, I'm back," Evan said, trying to sound calm. "Listen, I need your help, unofficially." It was clear from Mark's voice that he was wary. "What happened?" "Not on the phone," Evan shook his head, although his friend couldn't see him. "Anyway, my stepdaughter might be being threatened by a guy. I want to run this Adam Hayward through the database. Is there anything criminal on him?" Mark immediately became serious. "Threatening? A stalker? Tell me more." Evan pulled onto a deserted off-ramp and parked near a phone booth to talk quietly. Briefly, through clenched teeth, trying to contain his emotions, he laid out the gist of it. While he was away, someone named Adam, a financial consultant, had seduced his wife and was now behaving aggressively and could pose a danger, especially to his daughter. Mark listened silently, only occasionally interjecting briefly, "I understand." When Evan finished, the detective immediately said, "Give me your details, first name, last name, occupation. We'll see. Name Adam Hayward, though maybe not his last name. About 40 years old, financial consultant, private owner, I think." Evan listed everything he knew. Could have introduced himself as a friend of his colleagues, I'm not sure. And yes, he seems to have a quick temper, if that matters. "Got it. Give me some time. I'll check our databases now," answered Mark. "I'll call back when I find something." While his friend was checking, Evan got out of the car to stretch his legs. The wind blew fallen leaves along the deserted road. His soul was in a state of confusion. He had saved a stranger from a fire, but how could he save his own family from destruction? After 10 agonizing minutes, the phone came to life. Evan raised the receiver to his ear. "Mark, what a guy you are, Adam," the detective said instead of greeting. "There's something to see." "Did you find something?" Evan asked, alarmed. "Yeah. First of all, there's no Hayward in our databases," Mark said. "But there is Adam Hansen, about your age, who fits the description. We were convicted 7 years ago in a neighboring state." "For what?" Evan's heart sank. "Financial fraud," Mark reported. "He worked as a consultant for a company, embezzled clients' money, and ran up a large debt due to playing the stock market. The sentence was 3 years probation and a large fine. It seems he changed his last name after that. That's probably how he became Hayward." Evan clutched the phone tightly. Adam was a fraud. But that wasn't all. There was also a complaint of stalking, Mark continued. "A certain lady claimed a couple of years ago that he was harassing her after a short-term affair. But the matter did not go beyond the complaint. The woman soon took him back, not wanting publicity." "I see," Evan exhaled. The puzzle came together. Here he is, a silver-tongued seducer, a hunter for other people's money, and on top of that, an intrusive type who doesn't respect the word no. I would even say it's not clear." Mark grinned sullenly. "Listen, Keller, officially help." Evan ran his hand over his forehead. Telling the police would mean airing his dirty laundry in public. Publicity, investigation, but for the safety of Claire and Jenny, he was ready. "Yes, we must," he said decisively. "My wife has a bruise on her arm from it, so there is at least a charge of assault. We'll file a complaint about threats and stalking." "That's right," the detective approved. "Bring your wife and daughter tomorrow morning. Write everything down. I'll prepare the papers for a restraining order, prohibiting him from approaching your family. Of course, he may not care, but at least it's a formality, and if he doesn't show up, he'll go to jail for violating the order." Evan massaged the bridge of his nose. This was getting ugly, but there was no escape. "Thank you, Mark." "Take care of yourself and your loved ones, brother," the detective responded. "And watch out. If that asshole shows up, call 911 right away. Don't play the hero alone." Evan chuckled wryly as he recalled today's accident. "Well, that's enough for me." He thanked his friend again and hung up. For a moment, Evan simply stood on the side of the road, looking up at the rapidly darkening sky. So his worst fears were confirmed. Adam was a con man with a criminal past, prone to stalking women. The longer he was free, the more dangerous he was. No, now he definitely won't get his way. Evan clenched his fists. He was determined to protect his family from this guy, no matter what it cost him. He got into the pickup and started the engine. It was time to go back. Ahead of him lay some difficult explanations with his wife and daughter. By the time Evan pulled up to the house, it was already completely dark outside. He noticed a discreet police patrol near the neighboring house. Apparently, Mark had already made the first steps and assigned people to watch their house until the warrant was issued. Evan walked inside. The house was surprisingly quiet, only the light was on in the kitchen. He walked in. Claire and Jenny were sitting at the table. There were cups in front of them. Claire was drawing something on a piece of paper, and her mother was watching. "You can adjust the line here," Jenny said softly, pointing to her daughter's drawing. "Then it will be neater." "Thank you," Claire said. "You know, you've never done homework with me before." There was a hint of old resentment in his voice. Jenny looked down. "I'm sorry. I want to fix this." Then Evan appeared in the doorway. They both perked up. Claire immediately smiled. "Dad," Jenny stood up anxiously. "Well, I found out something," he nodded. "We need to discuss it." The three of them moved into the living room. Evan sat the girls down next to each other on the sofa, and he stood opposite them, arms crossed over his chest. He took a breath and began the hardest part. "I spoke to a detective friend of mine. He checked Adam against the databases, and unfortunately, the fears were confirmed. This man is a fraudster and apparently mentally unstable." Jenny turned pale. Claire froze warily. "This Adam's real name is Hansen," Evan continued. "He was convicted of financial fraud 7 years ago. He barely got out of it. There was also a complaint that he stalked a woman after an affair." "Oh my God," Jenny whispered, pressing her palm to her lips. Claire winced. "So he can do something bad to us, too." Evan squatted down in front of his daughter and looked into her eyes. "That won't happen. The police and I will do everything to protect you. Tomorrow morning, Mom and I will go to the station and write a statement. The police judge will issue an order prohibiting this Hansen from coming near us." "What if he comes anyway?" Claire asked quietly. "Then arrest immediately," Evan answered harshly. "But I hope he gets scared and runs away." Jenny nodded frantically. "Yes, yes, we will do everything." Evan stood up and took her hand, which showed signs of his grip from holding it too tightly in his anger earlier. "You will give official testimony, okay? You will not hide anything." "Of course," she lowered her head. "I deserve everything." Evan sighed heavily. Claire stood up and suddenly asked her mother directly, "What if he calls or writes to you?" Jenny frowned. "He's been ringing my phone off the hook for a while now. I haven't answered. I'd better turn it off altogether." "That's right," Evan nodded. "Not a word to him through any channels anymore." Claire bit her lip and added quietly, "He said today when he left that he would come back, right? I heard." Jenny dropped her face into her hands. He said, "I was very scared." Evan put his hands on both of their shoulders. "That's it. Stop being afraid. Now that we know who we're dealing with, we won't let him in." The women nodded, trying to compose themselves. Evan continued, "We'll all spend the night at home today. I already told Mark there will be a patrol on the street just in case. And tomorrow morning we'll go to the police." "Okay," Jenny whispered. Claire suddenly asked, looking at her father. "Dad, will you stay with us? I mean, you're not leaving?" Evan raised his eyebrows in surprise. "Why should I leave?" "Well," the girl looked away, "after all this, you're probably angry at your mother." Evan saw Jenny cringe out of the corner of his eye. He sighed and sat down next to his daughter, looking her straight in the eyes. "Claire, I promised. No matter what happens, I won't leave you. I'm here. No one is going anywhere until the danger passes, and then we'll see." Claire seemed to feel better. She pressed herself against his chest. Jenny asked quietly, gazing at the picture, "And where will you sleep? If you want, I'll sleep on the couch." Evan hesitated. He couldn't sleep next to her. Now the emotional wound was too fresh. But he didn't want to send his wife away, and Claire might be upset. "I'll make myself comfortable on the sofa," he decided. "It'll be more comfortable for everyone." Jenny hung her head, accepting this as due punishment. "If anything happens, call me," he said to both of them. "The night may be restless, but I won't close my eyes until I'm sure you're safe." "Thank you," Jenny whispered, "for everything." Evan shrugged. "You're welcome. I'm doing what I have to do." It had been a restless night. Jenny had given Claire a mild sedative before bed. Her daughter was on the verge of a breakdown. She kept imagining that Adam would burst in at any minute. Evan had covered himself with a blanket on the living room sofa, holding a loaded revolver and a phone nearby. By 11 o'clock, everyone had calmed down. A patrol car would occasionally drive slowly down the street. Evan could see the headlights through the curtains. "It's okay, we'll make it until the morning." He tried to calm down, listening to the silence of the night. Around midnight, just as he was beginning to doze off, the phone on the table vibrated. Evan woke up instantly and grabbed it. A text message from an unknown number. "You don't understand who you're dealing with. You can't stop me. She'll be mine." The blood pounded in his temples. Adam. Who else? He must have discovered that Jenny was no longer responding and decided to start threatening her husband. Evan sat up abruptly. His heart was beating fast, but not from fear, from rage. He thought for a second and quickly typed out a reply. "Try to touch my family, you will regret it. Send it with clenched teeth." The answer came almost immediately. "You'll regret this. The flames are already blazing." "Bastard," Evan breathed, clutching the phone. He didn't call to demand anything, it was useless. But he had to warn the police. He started to dial Mark's number when suddenly a new message arrived. A photo was attached. Evan opened the photo and his heart sank. It was of Claire sleeping in her bed that night with a nightlight on. Someone had taken the photo through the loosely drawn curtains of the window. Evan jumped up, cold. Adam her, in the yard, spying on a child. It is impossible to convey what he felt. In a split second, horror was replaced by the all-consuming fury of a father's anger. He darted silently to the living room window and looked out. In the darkness of the garden, a shadow appeared, sliding along the fence. "Adam," Evan barked into the black night. "I know you're here." The answer was silence. Then a rustle, a vague silhouette darted towards the gate at the back, near the garden. Evan jumped up and ran out onto the porch, not feeling the pain from the still unhealed bruises from the accident. In his hand, he clutched a heavy lantern. "Stop! The police are on their way," he shouted after the fleeing man. From behind, on the second floor, Claire's frightened voice was heard. "Dad, what happened?" "It's okay, close the door," he shouted over his shoulder. The garden gate slammed ahead. Sirens were already howling in the distance. A patrol had apparently detected movement, or Evan's screams had been relayed over the radio. He jumped off the porch and ran behind the house, toward the exit to the alley behind the property. The alley was empty. Only a thin trail of cologne was in the air, gone. Immediately, police cars pulled up to the house from both sides, and the doors swung open. "Police, what happened?" Evan lowered the lantern wearily. He was here. He ran out the back gate, towards the river, he said hoarsely, pointing to the dark end of the alley behind the house. Two officers rushed in with flashlights at the ready. The rest surrounded Evan. Is everyone alive? Are you injured? Only then did Evan feel his heart pounding furiously. The adrenaline subsided, leaving his hands shaking. He croaked, "Yes, everything is fine. He just took a picture of my daughter through the window and ran away." He held out a phone with a disgusting photo. The policeman grimaced. "Impudent fellow. We have to catch him," Evan breathed. "Is he hurt?" He remembered that morning. Adam holding Jenny, Claire kicking him before the shot. No, then he didn't seem hurt. Then Jenny and Claire ran out onto the porch in their dressing gowns. Jenny looked around in fear. "Evan, where is he?" Evan stepped towards them, hugging them both at once. "He's not here anymore. Everything is fine." Claire, standing next to her father, looked around with wide eyes. "He was here. He was looking at me." "TSS, it's over, dear," Evan whispered, stroking her head. One of the officers approached, saluting. "His tracks lead to the river. There's blood on the grass. He must have jumped into the water. We've told the squads downstream to comb the banks." "Did he really?" "Drown?" Mark's familiar voice came. The detective, having learned of the call to the Keller's house, had been running as fast as he could, and now he approached, out of breath. Evan shook his head. "I don't know. I'd like to believe it. The most important thing now is that you're all safe." Mark put his arm around his shoulder. "Let's see what's wrong with you." Evan didn't even immediately understand what his friend meant. It turned out that in the heat of the chase after Adam, he had brushed his shoulder against the protruding edge of the porch. While running, a fresh abrasion was turning purple on his skin, blood was seeping out. "Nonsense," Evan waved it off. "Everyone inside," Mark commanded. "We've set up a cordon. We won't let him in." The police politely but firmly escorted the family back to the house. There, they questioned Evan and Jenny again for the record, photographed his phone with the threats and a photo. By morning, the chase had led along the river, which runs out of town. Adam Hansen was nowhere to be found. Evan sat at the dining table, looking out the window at the gray pre-dawn sky. Claire, exhausted, dozed off on his shoulder. Jenny, fainting from lack of sleep and nervous exhaustion, slept nearby, her head in her hands. Mark looked into the kitchen, trying to speak more quietly. "We found traces of blood here and there, but nothing else. He was probably carried away by the current. If he was wounded, he wouldn't have gone far, but we can't consider him dead yet." Evan nodded. "Thank you, Mark." "Hang in there, Captain." The detective put his hand on his shoulder. "The main thing is that everyone's alive. Everything else will work out." Evan smiled faintly. He knew the ordeal was not over. There was a long road ahead to rebuild his family, but he held his sleeping daughter and wife and knew this moment was worth the fire. Together, and Adam was gone, melting into the night like an evil spirit. And whatever awaits them ahead, the family will now survive everything. In the morning, after a sleepless night, the Keller family went to the police station. All three of them walked into the station, Evan with Jenny by the arm and Claire clinging to him on the other side. Despite their nervousness, they seemed united, a united front. In Mark's office, Evan and Jenny took turns laying out the events on record. The betrayal, Adam's threats, the nighttime break-in. Claire, though it was hard for her, also testified, telling how she saw her mother with a strange man and how this man scared her. The girl spoke barely audibly, but clearly, and Mark nodded gratefully, recording every word. A couple of hours later, the formalities were over. The judge had already signed a restraining order. Adam Hansen was forbidden to come within 150 meters of the Keller family, as well as to make any contact. Violation of this order would result in immediate arrest. "If he tries anything, call 911 immediately," Mark instructed as they parted. "Although, to be honest, I think he's gone, if not to the next world, then far away from here." "I'd like to believe it," Evan sighed. When they returned home, they saw a patrol car on duty nearby. The police had agreed to keep an eye on the house for a few more days until everything calmed down. During the day, everyone tried to rest. After several days of stress, the body demanded its own. Claire climbed into her room with her textbooks. Jenny lay down for a couple of hours. Evan, having brewed strong coffee, thoughtfully walked around the house, each time glancing at the yard through the window. His head was buzzing from exhaustion, but his heart was gradually letting go of the incredible tension of the last few days. Everything is over, he repeated to himself, not fully believing that the nightmare was over. Later in the evening, Mark's car pulled into the yard. Evan went out to meet his friend on the porch. Mark was heading towards him with a smile. "So, are you living?" he asked cheerfully. Little by little, Evan nodded. Jenny and Claire also looked out of the house, smiling pleasantly at the detective. He took off his cap. "Hello, beauties. Glad to see you in good health." "Hello, Mark," Jenny said warmly. "Thank you for everything." "Oh, come on, it's work," he replied. "Well, I stopped by to tell you the good news. Your friend's car was found. He left it in some roadside motel. Got the numbers, by the way. Looks like he was in a hurry to get away." "So he's gone," Evan muttered, holding back a sigh of relief. "It's highly likely," the detective agreed. "We'll keep looking, of course. But honestly, I think he's already wet his pants from fear and has run away in all directions." Claire giggled softly at that. Evan smiled. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he could breathe deeply. "Thank you, Mark," he said seriously, extending his hand to his friend. "You saved us." The detective shook it and winked. "And you would do the same in my place." "Okay, I'll go. I have a lot of work to do. I don't dare to interfere with what your family is doing." "Whatever you like." He said goodbye and drove away. The patrol car was soon recalled as well. There was no longer any need for it. After long days of anxiety, the first calm evening was coming. However, the calm was external. Inside, each family member was seething with emotions and thoughts. Their paths had almost diverged forever, and now time was needed to heal the wounds. Evan, though he was holding up well, was barely able to stand from the fatigue that had built up. After making Jenny promise to look after Claire, he allowed himself to lie down and take a nap for the first time in 2 days. While he slept, Jenny cooked dinner, and Claire quietly cleaned the living room. She picked up the shards of dishes broken during the scuffle from the floor, wiped the remaining brown stains. At some point, the girl froze, looking at the sofa. Before her eyes, she saw her mother and Adam sitting there, hugging each other, here, on the daddy's place. Claire shook her head in annoyance, driving the picture away. "Forgive her," she said to herself. "You see, Mom repents." Claire took a deep breath and ran into the kitchen, where Jenny was just serving hot soup into bowls. "Mom, let me help you." The girl volunteered, grabbing the plates with sandwiches. Jenny smiled at her, warmly, for the first time in many anxious days. Claire smiled back. The two of them set the table. Jenny put on a nice tablecloth and got Evan's favorite plates from the sideboard. Claire put out a vase with the asters that had been alive since the fall they were growing by the porch. Evan woke up just in time for dinner. He went downstairs and froze at the kitchen threshold. His wife and daughter were sitting side by side at the table, quietly talking about something. Hearing footsteps, they both turned around at once and smiled happily at him. "Dad, how did you sleep?" Claire asked briskly. "It feels normal for the first time in a long time," he admitted, stretching slightly. "Wow, what smells so good?" "Your favorite meatball soup," Jenny reported, quickly getting up and pulling out a chair for him. "Sit down quickly, or it'll get cold." Evan sat up. Two pairs of familiar eyes looked at him with such hope and love that a lump rose in his throat. He cleared his throat and began to eat. My God, he was so hungry. The homemade soup tasted divine. "Well?" Jenny asked, watching his reaction tensely. "Delicious," Evan winked at her. She laughed with relief. Claire moved closer to her stepfather. "Dad, can I not go to school tomorrow? I'm so tired." Evan and Jenny exchanged glances. It was Friday, the weekend was coming up. They could give her a break. "Sure, honey," Evan nodded. "You can take the day off. You deserve it." "Thank you," the girl beamed. Jenny patted her daughter's hand. "Tomorrow we can do something together. Do you want to go to the park or watch a movie marathon at home?" "Let's have a movie," Claire happily agreed. "Popcorn, blankets, and you with us, Dad." "As you say, lady," Evan smiled. It took him a moment to realize that for the first time in a long time, they were talking about plans again with excitement rather than fear. Evan's heart sank with gratitude for this simple family conversation. The evening passed surprisingly calmly. For the first time in many days, the three of them sat in the living room without tension. Claire was doing her homework. Jenny was leafing through a cookbook, planning to treat the household with something tasty tomorrow. Evan settled down on the couch, took out his guitar, his old talisman, and quietly strummed the strings, playing an old country tune. Every now and then he caught Jenny's tender glance or Claire's smile. His soul thawed from these glances. Before going to bed, Claire timidly approached her father. "Dad, can I hug you before bed tonight? I was so afraid that I would lose you." Evan felt his throat tighten. He stood up and hugged her tightly. "I'm here, my dear. You have nothing to fear anymore." Jenny furtively wiped away a tear as she watched this scene. Then she came over and timidly touched her husband's elbow. "Good night, Evan." He turned to her. He suddenly wanted to kiss her forehead goodnight like he used to, but he only said softly, "Good night, Jen." She smiled sadly and, taking her daughter by the arm, headed upstairs. Evan sat alone in the quiet of the living room for a moment longer. He knew that even though the physical danger had passed, their family problems would not be solved overnight. But today, for the first time, he felt that there was hope. The family could be saved if only everyone worked together. And for the sake of these two, who were now sleeping on the second floor, he was ready to do anything. Evan had been unconscious for 3 days now. The intensive care unit was dark, with only the lights of the machines flickering and the gray dawn breaking outside the window. Jenny sat on a chair next to the bed, exhausted by anxiety and insomnia. She had barely left his side for 3 days, holding his hand tightly as if she were afraid to let go. Looking at Evan's pale, motionless face, Jenny asked herself over and over again, how did their life end up like this? Just a month ago, they were an ordinary, happy family, and now her husband was balancing between life and death because of her fatal mistake. In the silence of the room, she closed her sore eyes, and memories began to flow before her mind's eye. A hot August day. Jenny, in her sports uniform, comes out of a stuffy gym, wiping her neck with a towel. A stately stranger is unobtrusively waiting for her at the door. Dark blonde hair in a stylish haircut, piercing brown eyes, a self-confident smile. "You're training well," he says, with a slight accent, starting a conversation. "Excuse me for asking, but I saw you on the treadmill. My name is Adam." Then she felt embarrassed, even pleasantly proud. A handsome man had paid attention to her. They started talking. Adam introduced himself as a financial consultant who had recently moved to their city. They exchanged numbers. It seemed like nothing special. He supposedly offered to give investment advice, and she decided that there was no harm in professional advice. A couple of days later, Adam wrote and invited her to have coffee. Jenny agreed, lying to her husband that she was meeting a friend. "Just friendly coffee," she reassured herself. But the coffee smoothly flowed into a candlelit dinner, and the dinner into a kiss in the dark interior of his car. Remembering that moment now, Jenny shuddered with disgust at herself. She felt then that she was experiencing a second youth. Adam's compliments were intoxicating. His greedy interest in her every thought made her feel special, and not just a wife and mother. Intoxicated by romance, she began to lie to her husband more and more often. Over a month of secret meetings, they became so close that one day, when Claire was spending the night at a friend's, Jenny brought Adam to their home. That night became a nightmare. Claire woke up and saw them together. Jenny would never forget her daughter's look, full of horror, pain, and contempt. She denied everything then, trying to convince the girl that she had imagined it. but deep down, she already understood that she had done harm. I need to put an end to this, she decided the next morning, suffering from shame and an emotional hangover. In the last days before Evan's return, Jenny avoided Adam and began to answer coldly with excuses. He sensed the changes, called, wrote sometimes with anxiety, sometimes with playful reproaches, like, "Are you slipping away from me?" And then came the day of her husband's return. In the morning, Jenny firmly told Adam on the phone, "It's over, she wants to save the family," and asks him not to call anymore. But Adam showed up in person, waiting for Evan as soon as he flew to Texas. He rushed in and burst into the house. "We have to talk." There they are, standing in the living room that day. Claire is at school, they are alone. Adam paces the room irritably, his voice broken with anger. "So you're leaving me because of this fireman of yours? After everything we had? It was all a mistake." Jenny can barely believe she's saying these words. Her legs are shaking, her hands are hidden behind her back so he can't see her fear. "I shouldn't have. I love my husband. I don't want to continue this." "You shouldn't then," he mimics with a twisted grin. "But before, when you were moaning in my bed, you should have." Jenny turns pale at his rudeness, but pulls herself together. "Enough. It's over between us, Adam. Go away." "You're not going anywhere from me," he hisses, narrowing his eyes. He suddenly comes up close and grabs her by the chin. "Do you take me for a fool? Do you think I'll let you wipe your feet on me, liar?" Jenny tries to pull away, but he holds her head down, his fingers pressing painfully into her cheeks. "Let go," she screams, breaking free. Adam punches the wall next to her, but lets go, his gaze blazing. "You'll still come crawling to me on your knees, got it?" "No," Jenny holds on, even though tears are already burning her eyes. "Get lost." He grabs her hand with a jerk, squeezing her wrist with force. She cries out in pain. "I won't let anyone treat me like that, okay?" He spits in her face. Jenny kicks him in the shin, trying to break free. Pain shoots through her arm, like bones being crushed. But she manages to break free. She jumps back, clutching her swelling wrist. "Leave now, or I'll call the police." Adam chuckled angrily, moving towards the door. "You'll regret this, baby." He storms out, slamming the door so hard the glass shakes. Jenny is left standing in the middle of the living room, shaking with sobs and fear. Adam is gone, but not forever, as it turns out. He will return at night when Evan is home. The memories came flooding back, not sparing a single horrific detail. Jenny shook in the chair by the hospital bed, barely holding back her sobs as the images of the past came one after another. That's why she was here now, at the bedside of her beloved, begging fate not to take him away. Forgive me," she whispered, dropping her forehead onto her clasped hands on her husband's chest. "Just live, come back to us." As if hearing her plea, Evan suddenly squeezed her fingers tightly. Jenny immediately raised her head. Evan's eyelids trembled. He was starting to come to his senses. She jumped up. "Evan, darling, can you hear me?" Evan woke up in a pale room, filled with the smell of antiseptic. His head was spinning, his body was filled with heaviness, but the pain was almost gone. Apparently, the painkillers were working. Where was he? There were devices around, and Roman 4, a hospital. "Evan," a familiar voice came from the right. He turned his head. Jenny was sitting next to him, having pulled a chair right up to the bed. Her eyes were red from tears and lack of sleep. Her face was drawn. Seeing that her husband had come to his senses, she sobbed with relief. "Darling, you're awake." Evan tried to speak, but his dry lips barely parted. "Claire," he croaked hoarsely. "Claire, how is it?" Jenny immediately brought him the straw of the glass. He greedily sipped the cold water. "Claire's fine," she reassured. "She was discharged yesterday. I took her home. The wound is minor, it's healing. She's here in the hallway now, waiting for permission to see you." Evan breathed a sigh of relief. Now he could think about himself. He looked around. His left arm was wrapped in bandages, strapped to his shield. He remembered a bullet in the side. He tried to move. A dull pain echoed under his ribs, but it was bearable. You had surgery, Jenny guessed. They took out the bullet. The doctors said everything will be fine. You just need to recover. Evan nodded slightly, his eyes searching for someone else. Is Mark here? He went out to get some coffee. He'll be back soon, Jenny answered. Tears welled up on her eyelashes again. She pressed her forehead to his shoulder. Thank you. For everything. We almost lost you. Evan wanted to raise his good hand and stroke her head, but at that moment the door opened slightly and Claire looked in. Seeing that her stepfather was conscious, the girl rushed forward. Dad, Evan spread his right arm and she hung around his neck, bursting into tears of joy. I was so afraid. I'm so afraid. Evan, overcoming the aches in his body, hugged the girl tightly. Quiet, sunshine. It's all behind us. Behind. He closed his eyes, letting the word echo inside him. Yes, they were alive, they were saved. And Adam, even if he hadn't died in the river, he certainly wouldn't bother them anymore. That's good, Mark's cheerful voice came from the door. He returned with a tray of coffee and joyfully looked at the scene in the ward that had come to life. The hero has come to his senses. Well, you gave us a fright, Keller. Claire didn't let go of Evan's hand, as if she was afraid of losing it again. Jenny carefully hugged them both, crying with happiness. Mark froze, respecting the moment, then noisily sipped his coffee. Okay, I see you have your own atmosphere here. I'm glad everything is fine. Rest, hero. We still have to fill out award sheets for you. It wasn't for nothing that you took the bandit with your bare hands. Evan gave a wry smile. Oh, come on. No, well. The city should know its heroes. The detective did not let up. Okay, I'm kidding. Say hello to the family. Get well soon. He saluted with a glass of coffee and left. Evan glanced at his wife and daughter. They were sitting side by side on the edge of the bed, holding his hands, and their faces were finally filled with joy. He suddenly thought that he would endure all the pain just to see them like this again, smiling. Dad, Claire began quietly, I have something to confess. What is it, my dear? He asked, alarmed. She lowered her head, guiltily crumpling the edge of the blanket. There, when everything was at home, I rushed at him. And that's why he shot. And then at you too. It's my fault. Evan's heart sank. He shook his head. No, what are you saying? You are not guilty of anything. It is he, the criminal, who is to blame for everything. You wanted to protect your mother, that's why you rushed in. I would have done the same in your place. But you taught me not to mess with dangerous people. She stammered. Evan smiled kindly. And you, apparently, are like my dad. Just as stubborn and brave, since you weren't afraid. And you distracted that bastard, and you saved your mom by doing so. Claire looked at him in surprise. Is it true? It's true, Jenny confirmed, taking her daughter's hands in hers. He could have shot me if it weren't for you. You're a very brave girl, her voice wavered. Claire turned her gaze to Evan. But I still won't do it again. I promise. He laughed quietly and pulled her towards him. God grant that such situations never happen again. And be brave, it's a good quality. Claire pressed herself against him. Evan kissed the top of her head and suddenly met his wife's gaze. Jenny was smiling through her tears. It was as if something had dissolved between them, the last wall had gone. They had survived, they were together, what else was important now? Forgive me, Evan, she said under her breath so Claire couldn't hear. Evan, without letting go of his daughter's embrace, quietly replied, I think we've already gotten over this. There's no point in going back to the old ways. Jenny covered her mouth with her hand, crying again. But these were tears of relief. She gently touched his shoulder, looking grateful and devoted. Evan nodded. Let's talk later. He leaned back on the pillow, feeling a sweet languor covering his entire body. His side ached, but it was the pain of a living person, not a mortal wound. There were those nearby for whom it was worth living. He sighed quietly, allowing himself to relax for the first time in a long time. Well, now Daddy will fall asleep again, Claire whispered, smiling. Yes, we'd better go out for a while, let him gain strength. Jenny agreed. Evan was about to protest, but a yawn stopped him. He really was dead tired. "We're nearby. Call us if anything happens," the wife said affectionately. "Get some rest, Daddy," Claire added, kissing him on the cheek. Evan closed his eyes, and at the last moment, before he fell into a saving sleep, he felt Jenny gently kiss his hand, whispering, "Thank you." 2 weeks after the dramatic events, the Keller family was returning to a quiet life in their home, at least on the surface. In reality, the wounds, both physical and emotional, had not yet fully healed. Evan was slowly getting better. The doctors had forbidden him from exerting himself, so he spent most of the day at home, doing light exercises for his arm and resting a lot. Claire was also not going to school, yet she was homeschooled, understanding the stress she had endured. In the evening, the living room was soft and cozy. The floor lamp was on. Claire was dozing under a blanket on the sofa, leaning against her stepfather's shoulder. Evan quietly turned the pages of the family photo album, occasionally glancing at his daughter. Since he returned from the hospital, Claire had hardly left his side. She was clearly afraid to let her father go, as if he might disappear if she lost sight of him. Jenny emerged from the kitchen with a mug of steaming broth. "Evan, you've barely had any dinner. Drink some broth, please," she asked gently. "You need to gain strength." He didn't argue. He took the mug and nodded gratefully. Jenny stopped next to him, looking at her sleeping daughter. "You're tired, poor thing," she said quietly. "She had another nightmare this afternoon," Evan said quietly. "She woke up crying. I barely calmed her down." Jenny pressed her hand to her mouth. "God, it's okay. It will pass with time," he sighed. "The main thing is that we're close, and she knows that she's safe now." Jenny smiled faintly, but her gaze remained sad. They were silent for a while, listening to the measured breathing of Claire as she fell asleep. Finally, Jenny said quietly, "Evan." He looked at her questioningly. His wife clearly wanted to say something important. "I'm so grateful to you," she whispered, "for not turning away from us." Evan looked down. He still felt a heavy weight on his soul. Love and pain were fighting, and it was not yet clear which would prevail. "I do what I have to do," was all he answered quietly. Jenny nodded, accepting his words. She guiltily tugged at the edge of her apron. A soft chuckle broke the silence. Claire had snorted and muttered something funny in her sleep. Evan smiled tenderly. This was what was worth fighting for, the child's happiness. He stood up carefully, trying not to wake Claire. "I'll go a little into the yard and get some fresh air," he said quietly. "Let me help you," his wife immediately offered, seeing how he slowly straightened up, trying not to hurt his side, which had not yet fully healed. "No need, I'll do it myself," he replied. "I'll be back soon." As the front door closed behind him, Jenny turned her gaze to her daughter. Claire opened her eyes, apparently awakened by the voices. The girl sat up, wrapping herself in a blanket. "Did Dad come out?" she asked anxiously. "Yes, dear," Jenny answered softly. "Just some fresh air. He'll be right back." Claire just nodded, looking out the dark window. Even at home, even after everything, she still feared for her father if he was out of her sight. Jenny felt a sharp pain. She moved closer to her daughter and hesitantly put her arm around her shoulders. "Claire, honey, let's talk a little bit." The daughter did not move away, but did not look at her either, continuing to look ahead. The mother's heart ached, but it was impossible to remain silent. "Daughter," she whispered, "I cannot forgive myself for what I did. I caused you terrible pain. I will never forgive myself for this." Claire lowered her head, her lips trembling. "Why did you do this, Mom?" she asked barely audibly. "We were having a good time. Dad loved you so much." Jenny closed her eyes, holding back tears. "I loved. We were happy. I don't know what came over me, honestly. I was a fool, just say so. I decided to play with fire, and it burned us all." She carefully took Claire's hand and squeezed it tenderly, although the girl sat motionless, like an icicle. "You probably hate me now," Jenny whispered bitterly. "I'm angry," Claire admitted, her voice shaking. "I was in so much pain and scared. I thought our family would fall apart." Jenny barely held back her sobs. "It really almost fell apart. It was my fault. And yet, Dad," she took a deep breath. "Dad saved us. He's still with us. That means we have a chance to fix everything." Claire finally turned and looked her mother in the face. "Do you really want this?" Jenny flinched at the look, but held her ground. "With all my heart, my dear. I don't deserve either you or him, but I will try my whole life to earn your love and trust again." There was such despair in her voice that Claire couldn't bear it. Tears gushed from her eyes. She rushed and hugged her mother for the first time in a long time on her own. "I also want everything to be like before." "No, better than before," the girl cried on her chest. Jenny stroked her daughter's trembling shoulders and cried too, whispering, "It will be so, darling. I promise." They sat like that for several minutes, quietly crying and hugging each other, mother and daughter, both wounded but still not broken. Footsteps were heard outside the window. It was Evan returning from the yard. Hearing a quiet cry through the door, he carefully looked in. Seeing his two girls holding each other, the man's heart was filled with aching sadness and hope at the same time. Evan quietly closed the door, leaving Jenny and Claire alone, and took another circle around the yard. The cold air cooled his hot head. He knew that the wounds were beginning to heal, but there was a difficult road ahead. He once vowed to himself to be a real father to Claire, and he kept his vow in full. The stepfather became a father in every sense, and no trials can undo that. A memory came to mind of how, many years ago, 4-year-old Claire had fallen seriously ill with pneumonia. Jenny had come down with a fever herself, and Evan had carried the baby in his arms all night, bringing down the fever with cool compresses, singing soft lullabies. By morning, the fever had gone down, and the girl had fallen asleep, squeezing his finger with her tiny hand. It was then that Jenny had told him, "You are a real father to her." Now the family was going through a new trial, not illness, but betrayal and fear. But even believed they would cope. Claire needed both her mother and father, and he needed both of them. He would do everything to protect and preserve his family. He walked back into the house. Claire and Jenny were huddled together in the living room, both of them still red-eyed but relieved. They fell silent, embarrassed, when they saw Evan, but he just smiled softly at them. Evan walked over and sat down silently, enveloping them both in a wide embrace. Claire and Jenny leaned into him at the same time. They sat there, the three of them, embracing, drawing strength and warmth from each other, a family that had weathered a storm and was beginning to heal. A couple of weeks later, the family's life began to return to its usual course. It was as if the house was returning to itself, to the calm flow of days, where everything was predictable and under control. The physical wounds had almost healed, the scars on his side still stretched with sudden movements, but Evan could already manage a little around the house trim, the bushes near the porch, hammer in a loose step, start the car without pain. He even went to the unit a few times to fill out paperwork, discuss schedules, just to show off to his colleagues. They greeted him warmly, with respect, but the boss's gaze was more attentive than usual, as if waiting for Evan to say or ask something important. He did not ask. Claire returned to school, though at first she still shied away from the dark and was afraid to leave the house alone. Evan drove her to school as before, only now each trip was a ritual, with her tense smile, a quick "Bye, Dad," and his short nod that meant, "You're welcome. I see everything, I feel everything, and I am here." He wanted her to know that the danger was over, even if he wasn't entirely sure of it himself. But Jenny was unrecognizable to her acquaintances. She had definitely turned into a model wife and mother. Having taken an indefinite leave from work, she devoted all her time to her home and loved ones. The house sparkled with cleanliness, literally. Glass surfaces sparkled, the linen smelled of lavender, fresh towels lay folded in a stack in the bathroom. Lunches and dinners were ready to the minute, as if on schedule. All the little things of everyday life were settled in advance, as if Jenny lived according to an invisible to-do list, not giving herself time to stop. Sometimes it scared Evan. He found himself thinking that her movements were too measured. Her smile was as if stretched by a thread. Her voice was calm but slightly muffled, like someone who was always afraid of disturbing a delicate balance. It seemed that she was trying to compensate with her effort for every moment when she had not been there before. But there was a shadow in this diligence, as if it were not so much care as atonement. Evan saw it and silently assessed it. He said nothing. There was still a grievance in his soul, not a furious one, not all-consuming, but deep and tired, like a slight inflammation of an old wound, unnoticeable when at rest, but painful when touched. And yet, with each passing day, hope grew brighter. He caught himself doing it suddenly, in the way Claire laughed merrily at dinner, or when Jenny quietly adjusted the collar of his shirt, or in the rare touches, light, careful, but still familiar. He didn't say big words, neither about forgiveness nor about love. He didn't have difficult conversations. He just lived day after day nearby, observing, checking, and, without realizing it, trying to understand. Do he and Jenny have a present that can become a future? Sometimes he caught her gaze uncertain, anxious, full of pleading. And then he wanted to stretch out his hand to say, I'm still here, but something in him held him back, caution, fear of believing too soon, or perhaps a sense that they were still walking on thin ice, and one wrong word could break the ice completely. One evening, after putting Claire to bed, Evan went down to the kitchen to get water. Jenny was sitting there, bent over a notebook. Hearing her husband's footsteps, she started and quickly covered the notebook with her hand. Sorry, I didn't mean to scare you, Evan said softly, walking over to the refrigerator. It's okay, Jenny forced a smile. I was just thinking. Evan filled a glass of water and noticed his wife's tired appearance. She really was working hard, and sometimes she could hardly stand on her feet, although she never complained. He asked understandingly, Did Claire sleep peacefully? Yes, it's calm today. Jenny nodded and also got up from the table. I think she's already feeling better. Me too, Evan agreed. He finished his water and, after a pause, said, You and I need to talk. The wife tensed. She nodded in agreement, although her face turned white. They moved into the living room. Jenny sat nervously on the very edge of the sofa. Evan settled himself in the chair opposite her. He collected his thoughts for a few moments, looking at his clasped fingers. It's been more than a month, he said, looking up at her. A difficult month for all of us, and I've been thinking a lot. Jenny also clasped her hands, trying not to burst into tears prematurely. I understand. I see how hard you're trying, Evan continued. You're different now in a good way, like you've turned back into the woman I once fell in love with. Jenny blinked away a tear. I want to be her again, for you. Evan closed his eyes for a second, then looked firmly at his wife. But we can't just forget what happened. She swallowed convulsively. I know. Our trust is shattered, he said crisply. And while I am grateful to you for all your recent efforts, it is not enough. Jenny covered her face with her hands, as if expecting a blow. Her voice sounded muffled. What should I do to earn forgiveness? Tell me. Evan paused, choosing his words. I still haven't decided. Whether I can forgive betrayal, it's very difficult for me. Jenny removed her hands from her face and looked at him with tear-filled eyes. I understand. And yet, he sighed, I didn't file for divorce right away. Because I love my family. I promised Claire that I wouldn't leave her. And, he hesitated, I loved you all this time too. The wife began to cry again. I love you, Evan. I always have. I have no forgiveness, but I ask, let me prove it with love. Evan raised his palm, urging her to listen. I'm ready to try to restore everything. I want Claire to have a happy family again, and I want to trust you again, but on certain conditions. Jenny leaned towards him pleadingly. I'm ready for anything. First of all, complete openness, he said clearly. No secrets. Phone, email, social media, everything on display. Not that I'm going to pry, but the fact is, no secret areas. Of course, his wife nodded eagerly. She almost happily accepted this condition. It was obvious that she had expected more. I've wanted to tell you myself for a long time. Here. She grabbed the notebook she had been working on, turned the page, and handed it to him. Here are all my passwords and codes. For my phone, email, everything. You can change them yourself if you want. Evan was slightly taken aback. Logins, passwords, pins were neatly written on the sheet of paper, the full set. He looked up at Jenny. "Thank you," was all he said, putting the notebook aside. "I'll continue. Second, we'll need the help of a specialist. The marriage has been through a terrible shock. We can't cope on our own. I think we should see a family psychologist." "Yes, yes, of course," she responded immediately. "I've already found the center. We can sign up tomorrow." Evan raised his eyebrows in surprise. "You were looking for the center?" Jenny looked down, admitting, "I went to one consultation alone. I wanted to understand how I could regain my family's trust." Evan nodded slowly. Another point in her favor. "Good. And the third?" He stood up, not knowing how to formulate it. "The third condition. There will be no more favors from me. You already took advantage of one chance. Didn't appreciate it. There won't be a second." Jenny stood up too, sobbing. "I understand. If I stumble again, I will lose everything. Believe me, this will not happen. Never." Evan looked at her intently. "I really hope so. He touched her hand for the first time during the entire conversation. "I want us to become a family again. I will forgive you, but I won't be able to forget. At least for now." "I know," Jenny whispered. "I know." They stood opposite each other, silently looking into each other's eyes. Then she timidly asked, "So, you're staying?" Evan sighed heavily, as if throwing off a weight. "Yes, I'm staying. I don't want a divorce. We'll work on our relationship as long as it takes." Before he could finish speaking, Jenny threw herself on his chest, bursting into tears, happy ones this time. He hugged her, stroking her back, feeling her body shake with sobs of release. Thank you," she whispered. "I won't let you down. I'll prove that I'm worthy of being your wife. Thank you." Evan held her in his arms in silence. Deep down, yes, the pain was still there, but now another feeling was rising above it. Tenderness. He kissed the top of her head. "Enough, quiet down. Everything is fine." Jenny raised her tear-stained face. "I love you." "I know," he answered quietly. At that moment, Claire appeared on the stairs, attracted by the muffled voices. "Mom, Dad?" she asked sleepily. "Are you awake?" They pulled away from each other, wiping away tears. Evan smiled guiltily at his daughter. "Sorry, honey, did we wake you up?" Claire went downstairs, eyeing them anxiously. "Everything is fine?" "Yeah." Jenny and Evan exchanged glances. "We're just talking." The daughter suddenly laughed with relief. "And I was already scared." She came closer. "Have you made up?" Evan pulled her close. "Let's say we decided to start all over again." Claire glanced at her mother, who smiled, wiping her eyes. "Yes, dear. Dad is staying with us." The girl sighed happily and buried herself between them, hugging both her father and mother at once. "Thank you. Thank you." Jenny exchanged glances with her husband over her daughter's bowed head. "We should say thank you." Evan nodded, feeling a lump in his throat. He hugged his beloved girls tighter, thinking that there was a lot of work ahead, but now he knew exactly what it was for. "Okay, everyone to your bedrooms," he said, feigning severity, having overcome his excitement. "It's late already." "Could it be?" Claire asked timidly. "Could we all do something together tomorrow? Like go somewhere?" Evan looked at Jenny. "Why not? Great idea. Let's go to nature." The wife perked up. "We'll have a picnic, cook fish soup over a campfire." "Hooray, picnic!" Claire clapped her hands. Chatting cheerfully, the three headed upstairs, with Claire, already forgetting about her nightgown, skipping ahead, offering food ideas. Evan, following behind, listened to his daughter's ringing laughter, picked up by his wife's voice. A heavy stone had finally fallen from his heart. The family was alive. They were making plans for tomorrow together. and no evil demon would ever get in their way again. 6 months later, the Keller family home was filled with laughter again. The living room was cozy, with summer sunlight streaming through the curtains and catching light on the updated framed photographs. In them, the three of them, Evan, Jenny, and Claire, smile happily, hugging each other against a backdrop of majestic mountains. That January mountain getaway had been the starting point for their new life. After all the shocks, they worked hard on themselves. Evan and Jenny honestly went to a family psychologist, learned to trust and hear each other again. Claire also visited a therapist, and gradually the nightmares retreated. The girl blossomed again, returned to her old hobbies. Sometimes her gaze fell on her shoulder, a thin pinkish scar, a reminder of what she had experienced, but now she was almost proud of it, as a symbol of her own resilience. There was little trace left of the troubles of the past. Just a thin line on Evan's side and a couple of small scars on Jenny's body. They saw them as marks of victory, reminders of what their family had cost them. Claire was burning with anticipation that day. There had been an essay contest at school about a hero in your family, and her work had been chosen as the best. Now she couldn't wait for her father to return from duty so she could present him with her diploma and certificate of honor. Jenny watched her daughter with a smile. "Don't fidget, honey," she laughed, watching Claire run from the window to the door every 2 minutes. "Mom, when will he arrive?" The girl jumped up, looking out into the yard once again. "Any minute," Jenny assured. She finished arranging the tiny tarts she had baked for her husband's arrival into vases. "Let's glue the pretty wrapper to the frame in the meantime." Together, they wrapped the gift frame with the essay and diploma in bright foil. They barely managed to do it when the noise of a car pulling up was heard in the yard. "Daddy's here," Claire squealed happily, throwing aside the ribbons and running out the door. Evan parked the red pickup truck at the porch and had just opened the door when his daughter hung on his neck, almost knocking his cap off. "Be careful, Pilot, you'll strangle me now," he laughed, twirling with her. "Well, any good news?" "Yes," the girl assured him, beaming with delight and kissing him soundly on the cheek. Jenny came up, a little further away, looking at them softly. Evan, still holding their daughter in his arms, extended his free hand to his wife. She put hers in his, and he gently pulled them both close. "How's the shift?" Jenny asked, standing on tiptoe and touching her lips to his unshaven cheek. "The usual," he replied. "A couple of false calls, they got the cat out of the tree, they brought down Grandma's blood pressure." "It's boring, Dad," Claire winked. "Yeah," Evan smiled, putting her down. "Well, it seems like everyone is safe. The fire is out. We can take care of the household. What's new with you?" "We have a surprise for you," Claire blurted out, already pushing him toward the porch. "But close your eyes." Evan pretended to close his eyes obediently as Claire pulled him into the living room and sat him down in a chair. "Okay, open up," she commanded. He opened his eyes. In front of him, wrapped in fancy foil, was a frame tied with a bow. Evan looked at the girls questioningly. "Turn it around," Claire said impatiently. He tore off the packaging and saw under the glass a sheet of paper covered in neat handwriting. The title read, "My Hero is My Dad." Evan's mouth was already open in amazement, and Claire was chattering excitedly. "I wrote an essay about you, and it won the competition. They gave me a diploma and a certificate. I framed it to give to you." "I see," was all he could say, feeling his throat suddenly dry. Jenny beamed and placed her hand on his shoulder. "Read it to yourself if you want." "No, I'll read it out loud," he hoarsely objected and began. "My dad's name is Evan Keller. He is 41 years old, and he is the bravest and kindest man in the world. He is a fire captain and saves people from fire. He also saved me and my mom from a very bad person. My dad is a real hero. He is brave, kind, and always protects me. I am not afraid of any troubles because my dad is always there and will come to the rescue. I want to grow up and be as reliable for my family as my dad is for ours." At the last lines, Evan's voice trembled. He fell silent, trying to pull himself together, but he couldn't. Tears came to his eyes. He stood up and hugged his daughter tightly. "Thank you, sunshine. This is the best gift I could have dreamed of." "Thank you, Daddy," Claire whispered, also tearing up. "Thank you for making us okay again." Evan closed his eyes, holding his daughter close. Jenny hugged them both, clinging to her husband. "We love you very much," she said quietly, and there was so much sincerity in these words that something inside Evan turned over with happiness. He kissed her, then ruffled Claire's smiling hair. There was silence above their house, broken only by the distant twittering of birds. Many more ordinary days awaited them ahead with small joys and, perhaps, difficulties, but they were ready for them. After all, the Keller family, having gone through betrayal and danger, like a phoenix rose from the ashes even stronger and more united. As Captain Evan Keller hugged his loved ones, he felt like the happiest man in the world. Every day we open our eyes to what some are trying to hide. We get the truth out of the dark for you. For everyone who wants to know and not believe fairy tales. A like is your sign that the truth is important to you, and the subscription is your promise to be with us until the end. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.